Just hours ago, a geopolitical earthquake shook the world. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro was captured by United States forces. Beijing immediately denounced the action, calling it a blatant violation of sovereignty. Now, analysts fear China's response could trigger a global currency crisis. The news broke on the morning of January 4th, 2026. In a swift, clandestine operation, United States Special Forces apprehended Nicolas Maduro, the long-standing president of Venezuela. The details remained scarce, but the impact was immediate and profound. Maduro, wanted by Washington on charges of narco-terrorism, had been a defiant symbol of resistance against U.S. influence in Latin America. His capture represented a decisive, unilateral action by the United States, executed without the explicit approval of international bodies. This audacious move sent shockwaves across the diplomatic landscape. While some Western nations expressed quiet approval, others voiced concerns over the precedent it set for international law and sovereignty. The global financial markets, already sensitive to geopolitical tensions, began to stir with unease. Traders watched for reactions, particularly from nations that had long championed the principle of non-interference in sovereign affairs. Among these, China's response was swift and unequivocal. Within hours, Beijing issued a stern condemnation, describing the capture as an egregious breach of international norms and a dangerous escalation of unilateralism. The official statements from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs were unusually sharp, emphasizing the sanctity of national sovereignty and the perils of interventionism. This was not merely a diplomatic spat. It was a perceived direct challenge to the very architecture of global governance that China had sought to uphold and, in some ways, reshape. For Beijing, the capture of a sitting head of state by a foreign power was more than an affront to Venezuela. It was a potential threat to the stability of the international system itself. Such an act, in their view, could empower other nations to disregard sovereign borders and legal frameworks, creating a volatile and unpredictable world. The implications for nations holding significant foreign reserves, including China, were clear. If one nation's leader could be seized, what protection did sovereign assets held abroad truly possess? Consider this wisdom, my friends. A system built on trust, whether in commerce or diplomacy, is like a delicate ceramic vessel. It can hold immense value and serve many purposes, but a single, careless blow can shatter it irrevocably. The United States' action, however justified it might have appeared to some, struck directly at the vessel of international trust. The immediate concern for global finance centered on the precedent this action established for the security of sovereign assets. China holds trillions in foreign exchange reserves, much of it denominated in U.S. dollars and held in U.S. treasuries. The thought that these assets, or the assets of any nation, could somehow become vulnerable due to geopolitical disputes was deeply unsettling. This was the silent, underlying fear that began to ripple through central banks worldwide. To understand the gravity of the moment, one might compare the swiftness and decisiveness of the U.S. action to a flash crash in algorithmic trading. In such an event, a single, unexpected data point, or an aggressive automated order, can trigger a cascade of reactions across interconnected markets, leading to immediate and profound volatility that few anticipated. Here, a political action served as that initial destabilizing algorithm, setting off a chain reaction in the geopolitical and financial spheres. The stakes were immense. Beyond the immediate diplomatic fallout, the incident threatened to accelerate a fundamental shift in the global financial order. For years, the dominance of the U.S. dollar had been largely unquestioned, underpinning international trade and finance. But challenges to this hegemony had been slowly gathering pace, driven by geopolitical rivalries and the desire for greater multipolarity. The Maduro capture and the subsequent outrage from Beijing injected a potent new variable into this already complex equation. My friends, the ancients understood that true power lies not just in might, but in the perceived legitimacy of one's actions. When legitimacy is questioned, even the strongest foundations can begin to crack. The United States, by acting unilaterally, risked undermining the very trust that underpins its global financial influence. China, with its vast economic power, now faced a critical decision: how to respond to an act it viewed as both illegal and deeply threatening to its long-term strategic interests. The world held its breath, awaiting Beijing's next move. The world did not have to wait long. Within hours of Beijing's forceful denunciation, whispers began to circulate through global financial hubs. Then, the whispers turned into a roar. China had launched what analysts immediately dubbed a currency war. This was not the moderate appreciation or stability that many had projected for the renminbi in 2026. This was an aggressive, decisive move designed to send an unmistakable message. For months leading up to this point, analysts, as detailed by Capital Economics and ING, had broadly expected the renminbi to appreciate moderately towards around 6.8 against the US dollar in 2026. The People's Bank of China had consistently prioritized currency stability, maintaining a managed floating exchange rate regime as evidenced by its official statements. Modest, controlled adjustments were the anticipated norm, driven by China's trade surplus and inflation differentials. The idea of an aggressive currency war was considered far-fetched, contrary to Beijing's stated policy of gradualism and stability. Yet, the unthinkable had now happened. China's initial salvo in this currency war involved a series of coordinated actions. First, the People's Bank of China announced an immediate, sharp depreciation of the renminbi against the US dollar, moving it well beyond the previously managed band and far exceeding any anticipated gradual adjustments. This was a direct, aggressive intervention in the foreign exchange market, designed to make Chinese exports cheaper and increase the competitive pressure on other economies, particularly the United States. Simultaneously, state-owned financial institutions, acting under direct instruction, began to aggressively diversify holdings away from US dollar-denominated assets. This included accelerated selling of US treasuries and a significant shift towards other major currencies, gold, and strategic commodities. The message was clear. China was reducing its reliance on the US financial system, and it was doing so with unprecedented speed and scale. This was not merely a portfolio adjustment. It was a strategic weaponization of its vast reserves. The why behind this dramatic shift was rooted in Beijing's perceived need for retaliation and self-preservation. The capture of Maduro was seen as a direct challenge to the fundamental principle of sovereign immunity, a concept Beijing holds sacrosanct. If the United States could unilaterally seize a head of state, what was to stop it from potentially freezing or seizing sovereign assets held within its jurisdiction? For China, the security of its foreign reserves, vital for its economic stability and global ambitions, was now directly under threat. This move was also a calculated challenge to dollar hegemony. Beijing had long sought to promote the international use of the renminbi and reduce the world's dependence on the US dollar. The Maduro incident provided a powerful, albeit dangerous, catalyst. By demonstrating that the US financial system could be a weapon, China aimed to accelerate the global shift towards alternative currencies and payment systems, offering its own currency as a more politically neutral option. It was a high-stakes gamble to reshape the global financial order. The global market reaction was one of pure shock and immediate volatility. The sudden depreciation of the renminbi sent ripples through currency markets, causing other Asian currencies to weaken in sympathy. Equity markets saw significant sell-offs, particularly in sectors exposed to international trade. The most immediate beneficiaries were safe haven assets. Gold and silver prices surged dramatically as investors sought refuge from the escalating geopolitical and financial uncertainty. This was a classic flight to safety, driven by fear and the breakdown of established norms. This unfolding scenario, my friends, bears a striking resemblance to a game theory exercise, specifically a chicken game. Both the United States and China are now on a collision course, each making moves based on anticipating the other's reactions. The U.S. made a bold, unilateral move. China responded with an equally bold economic counterpunch. Neither side wants to swerve first, fearing a loss of face or strategic advantage. The danger is that both sides might accelerate, leading to a mutually destructive outcome for the entire global economy. The illusion of control is a powerful yet dangerous thing. The ancients taught us that hubris often precedes a great fall. Nations, like individuals, can become so enamored with their own perceived strength that they fail to see the consequences of their actions on the broader, interconnected world. True wisdom lies in understanding that even the mightiest power is ultimately interdependent. This currency war is a stark reminder that economic power, when wielded as a weapon, can cause widespread destruction. The United States, caught off guard by the ferocity and speed of China's response, scrambled to formulate a counter-strategy. Initial reactions ranged from dismissive rhetoric, accusing China of economic manipulation, to more measured calls for de-escalation. But the damage to trust was already done. The U.S. Treasury and Federal Reserve began to assess the implications of a sustained Chinese sell-off of U.S. debt and the potential for increased borrowing costs for Washington. Other nations found themselves caught in the crossfire. Developing economies, often reliant on stable trade relationships and a predictable global financial system, faced immediate disruptions. Their currencies fluctuated wildly, their export markets became uncertain, and their access to international capital grew more expensive. The global economy, already grappling with post-pandemic recovery and inflation, now faced a new, self-inflicted wound. The prospect of escalation loomed large. Would the United States respond with trade tariffs, further sanctions, or even its own currency interventions? Would China further accelerate its de-dollarization efforts, perhaps by pushing for the widespread adoption of its digital yuan in international trade? The initial currency war, sparked by a single geopolitical act, threatened to spiral into a broader economic conflict, fundamentally reshaping alliances and trade routes across the globe. My friends, historical lessons abound. Empires of the past, from Rome to Great Britain, eventually faced challenges to their economic and military dominance. Often, these challenges arose not just from external rivals, but from internal overreach or a failure to adapt to changing global dynamics. The current confrontation serves as a powerful reminder that no nation's economic supremacy is guaranteed forever. The true measure of wealth is not simply the size of one's treasury, but the stability and trust within the system that allows that wealth to endure and grow. The immediate aggressive phase of China's currency war eventually subsided into a tense, uneasy equilibrium. The initial shock waves reverberated across global markets for weeks, but a new, fundamentally altered financial landscape began to emerge. The capture of Maduro and Beijing's unprecedented response had served as a stark, indelible turning point, accelerating trends that had been slowly simmering for years. The most profound outcome was a significant erosion of trust in the US dollar's status as the undisputed global reserve currency. While the dollar did not collapse, its perceived security and neutrality were undeniably compromised. Nations and corporations began to actively diversify their holdings, seeking alternatives to reduce their exposure to potential geopolitical weaponization of the U.S. financial system. This was a direct result of China's actions, which had successfully highlighted the vulnerabilities inherent in a dollar-centric world. The immediate flight to safety saw gold and silver prices stabilize at significantly higher levels, reflecting a new baseline of systemic uncertainty. Investors, central banks, and even individual savers increasingly viewed precious metals as essential hedges against currency volatility and geopolitical risk. The long-term wealth preservation perspective, often championed in these discussions, proved prescient in a world where paper assets faced unprecedented challenges. The renminbi, while initially depreciated, found a new, more prominent role in international trade, particularly in regions aligned with Beijing. China aggressively pushed for yuan-denominated trade agreements, especially in energy and commodities, offering incentives and leveraging its economic influence. This move, coupled with the accelerated development and adoption of the digital yuan, began to chip away at the dollar's transactional dominance, creating parallel financial ecosystems. Consider this, my friends. The shift in global currency dynamics can be likened to a network effect, disruption in the technology world. For decades, the US dollar enjoyed an overwhelming network effect. The more people used it, the more valuable and indispensable it became. But a significant perceived flaw in the network, like a major security breach or a sudden loss of trust, can cause users to migrate to alternative platforms. China's currency war, sparked by the Maduro incident, acted as that critical vulnerability, causing a significant number of users to question their reliance on the dominant network and actively seek alternatives. The lasting impact of this period was the acceleration of de-dollarization, not as a sudden event, but as an undeniable ongoing process. The world moved towards a more multipolar currency system, characterized by increased volatility and a complex interplay of competing financial blocks. The era of unquestioned dollar supremacy had passed, replaced by a more fragmented and competitive landscape. This did not happen overnight, but the events of early 2026 acted as the undeniable catalyst. My friends, the wisdom of the ages teaches us that true wealth is not measured solely in fleeting paper currencies or the accumulation of material possessions. It resides in stability, in trust, in community, and in the enduring value of ethical conduct. In times of profound uncertainty, when the very foundations of the global financial system are shaken, the tangible, timeless assets like gold and silver reassert their fundamental importance. They are not merely commodities. They are historical records of value, guardians against the ephemeral nature of human constructs. The geopolitical implications extended far beyond currency markets. The incident forced nations to reevaluate their alliances and strategic dependencies. The United States faced a reckoning regarding the limits of its unilateral power and the long-term costs of alienating major economic partners. China, having demonstrated its willingness to weaponize its economic might, solidified its position as a formidable, if sometimes unpredictable, global power. The incident served as a powerful lesson in the interconnectedness of geopolitics and finance. A single, decisive political action had triggered an economic response that reshaped global monetary policy and accelerated a fundamental shift in international power dynamics. The capture of a single individual in a faraway land had, in essence, lit a fuse that detonated a currency war, forever altering the trajectory of the 21st century's financial order. The world had witnessed a pivotal moment, a stark reminder that in the complex tapestry of international relations, trust is the most precious and fragile commodity. Once broken, it takes generations to rebuild, if ever. The events of January 4th, 2026, etched a new chapter into the annals of global finance. A chapter defined by heightened uncertainty, strategic competition, and the enduring search for true, resilient value. The lessons of this dramatic confrontation will continue to unfold for years to come, shaping the fortunes of nations and the security of wealth for us all.